Welcome to Tuesday Talk Season 2, presented by Art with Abir, our weekly conversation series exploring contemporary art, design, and architecture through India's leading voices. Today, marking Dalit History Month, we speak with Dr. Rahul Dev, art historian, critic, and scholar, whose work spans visual studies, German art history, and marginal art practices. We will discuss Dalit visual culture in India, from Ambedkarite iconography to contemporary artistic practice, and what his scholarship reveals about representation, visibility, and social justice. Welcome, Dr. Rahul Dev. You have observed how images of Ambedkar, Phule, and other leaders, along with Buddhist symbols, have become central to Dalit visuality in the public sphere. At this moment, in the now, how would you define Dalit visual culture? And how is it distinct from India's mainstream visual language?
Dalit visual culture, it comprises of a lot of things you can make out now. It is evident everywhere. So earlier, we used to have, I was in JNU. So JNU has a culture of lot of visuality because it's a very political campus, and we used to see all the images right from from the Marx, Lenin, the Indian attributes of the left leaders, like Bhagat Singh also claimed as a leftist leader, and some others, like NSUI had their own posters, and then right wing. The AVP, the right wing student wing. So they also had Veer Savarkar, this and that. So Ambedkar never was part of this. What do you call framework, visual culture, and there were other books also, like a lot of big books on visual culture you can find, like by Mark publication, by others. You will never see the mention of Dalit visual culture anyways. So Dalit visual culture, you one has to go into the field, to find out what Dalit visual culture is all about. So Dalit visual culture, when we come to the experiences of university, so we could only see that culture, visual culture, during the April 14th, the celebration of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's birthday. So there are a lot of posters we guys used to make, from UDSF, United Dalit Student Forum, and some guys from the student outfit from the BSP. So yeah, but if you go in the society, you will see the political posters, and then you see Ambedkar becoming prominent in, I'm talking about 2010, 2008, 10, 11, 12, that time. So, and the first person who marked out, there is a poster, the use of poster and the use of paraphernalia is quite important, becoming important, was Professor Gopal Guru. So he has written also in one of his article that the Ambedkar is being the image of Ambedkar is being used by, from all the segments, right from the right from the leftist to the rightist to the centrist. Everybody is trying to trying to embrace the figure of Ambedkar as an image.
I have noticed that across your writings, you emphasize how the term Dalit transforms a stigmatized descriptor into a confrontational political identity that demands recognition and dignity. How has this shift from being named by others to naming oneself shaped the kind of images Dalit communities produce and circulate? What empowerment does this make possible through images? So I want to sort of get into how when it comes to the visual culture, the
Hmm.
empowerment is made possible through Ambedkar statues and the other sort of visual signifiers.
Yeah, images have a lot of power. It has a, I use the term affect. Yes, affect, affect, or emotion, so I'm using this term affect. So what this affect, so this so the affect is a kind of it's a kind of an engine which moves people. So affect can be also interchangeably used as a kind of word called feeling, feeling. If I'm Yeah, feeling. So it can move people, it can people can join each other just by image. Term, Dalit, and the use of affect, with the image of Ambedkar or the other Dalit leaders. So it combines people, right? people right from the Uttar Pradesh to Bihar to Tamil Nadu. So it gives some kind of currency, some kind of power. People feel connected through that image. So also one can look at the idea of community, imagine community. So this image also work like that. So people can imagine oneself, that we can be part of this category, or this kind of political structure, or this kind of. So somehow they can they can come under umbrella as a part of protest, or as a part of kind of normative that is normative struggle for power. So yeah, this is the effect. It can move people, it can relate people to people. But in the end, of my article which you mentioned, I doubt, the image is not more important. The important is the idea which the image enshrine. I suppose the image of Ambedkar, what does idea it produces or reproduces, that is more important.
You have observed that, or you argue that Dalit visuality emerges primarily in public popular art, such as
Hmm.
calendar images,
Hmm.
banners,
Hmm.
posters, that
Hmm.
statues, etc., and even in monuments, rather than elite art world spaces. And why do you think Dalit visuality has not received that sort of recognition and scholarship it deserves?
It's very evident, like because of the subjugation, and there are some kind of dominance of certain certain caste groups. It's very evident in politics, in academia, in other field. uh, yeah, but one I you that's true, but this the kind of the Dalit images, they developed more in the popular imagination than the elite art spaces. That's true. I mean, one could feel today also. You could feel that you won't see there are much representation of artists coming from the lower caste or Dalit background. Now there are few emerging. So now you see, Atmaja, that yeah, this is I'm making distinction between this popular and the artists from the studio practices, or the practices what they do in the large scale exhibition. So for example, I give you example of Vikrant Bise or Prabhakar Kamble, Rashri Gudi. These three artists. I mean, Amol Patil is also there. So these four artists. From where they are getting if you look at Prabhakar Kamble image or Vikrant Bise image, so you find these images are the come from the imagination of the popular. you know you know what I mean? The kind of protest which are happening outside the Shine Bagh, the kind of protest which happened in other places, with the image of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, or the sites of, like Chaitya Bhumi, and other kind of places, of where Dr. B.R. Ambedkar belonged to, or the other leaders, belong to, like the architectural kind of Mayawati's, what you call that park, uh, so, uh, so the imagination of these artists come from, they borrow their imagination from popular culture, and they give back to them. You know what I mean? They take their imagination from those posters and everything. If you look at Vikrant Bise's work, it is very much evident. His works are mostly belong to the popular culture, what you could imagine or you could spot on the road, on the streets. And that imagination he brings up back in the fine art practices, in the paintings, and in case of Prabhakar Kamble, in his sculptures. So yeah, so it's two-way journey. Like artists are looking outside in popular culture, and they are bringing in their practices, and they are being exhibited in the Biennale, or in the gallery circles. Like especially, I would name here one gallery, Ananta Art Gallery. So they are Vikrant Bise is the first artist who exhibited in the commercial gallery.
So, sir, you have closely studied Savi Savarkar's artistic practice and aesthetics, and the question is, how do you situate his work within the broader framework of Dalit visual culture? Would you tell us more about his art? for those people who are not familiar with its art?
First time I mean, I was when I joined School of Art and Aesthetics in the year 2003. I had no idea what uh, there could be a there could be a art which can be called by a Dalit art. I mean, I have no idea Dalit art bhi kuch hota hai. I mean, there is something called Dalit art. So the very first time I encountered the term Dalit art or Dalit aesthetics was with the work of Savi Savarkar, which I saw in the World Social Forum. I mean, it was like I was like, wow, man, what is this? And I just took out the catalog, like brochure. This is the brochure I got from World Social Forum, and the name of the show is Voice for Voiceless. So this is the image, what he was producing, the image of Manu, Manu Smriti. So the giver, the yeah, so the Manu. So that time, Dalit art and imagery. This article, there is an article written here, small article, a small piece of article. It is not written by any art historian, by the way. You know who wrote this catalog? Dr. Tulsi Ram. I was like astounded. I was like surprised. यार इस तरह का आर्ट भी होता है. So I can relate, कि यार this kind of art one should go into. One should do some research. And I didn't know who Savi Savarkar was. Later on, I realized when I got into my MPhil program, so I got to meet him. Then I understood who is this. And the very first show the very first show of Savi Savarkar was being created by my supervisor that time when I registered myself for the MPhil program, and that same year, to year 2007, she was creating the show for Savi Savarkar. The name of the show was, I think, Eyes Recast or something. So this is another catalog, that published, that kind of booklet was published that time, because he became very popular. Savi Savarkar, first Dalit painter in the history of modern Indian art. So he is considered as the first Dalit painter in the history of, first Dalit painter in a way, kind of, the kind of, he has that kind of, passion, interventionist mode of, image making, that he did. So his works are mostly, yeah, very violent. It's about Manu. It's about the Devdasi. The Devdasis in the temples. Devdasi tradition in the temples of Maharashtra, southern Maharashtra, Karnataka, and some other parts of South India. So he himself, he traveled all these places, and he uh, kind of documented, or he experienced those, those people, the subjugated people, like Devdasi or Jokta, the kind of, the person who has no gender. So he has seen those people in his life, and the people, those who, another work, I mean, other kind of research I did, the kind of people he researched on, people those who live on the pedestrian, on the street, ran basera. Have you heard of ran basera? In the winters in Delhi, we have ran basera, na, the kind of makeshift places for the poor people, those who, so he made paintings on those people also. So it was very, very admiring at that time, and also very heart wrenching. So there is, I mean, I would say, I mean, in his images there is no sense of joy or anything. It's always, hard hitting. His images are always hard hitting. So yeah, it's very distinct from the images what we have now from the works of the, Vikrant Bise. He's drawing a lot of images from the labor, how the Dalit labor, or the lower caste marginal labor, they perform outside their tasks. So this kind of thing. But the idea of labor in Savi Savarkar is totally different. It is not labor, basically. It's a laborer. The difference we have to make. He is making the images of laborer. The kind of people, those who go into, the people, those who clean, the people, those who clean the, animal, the, the residues of animal, the skin of animal. So those kind of labor, not labor but laborer. Sometimes it is unpaid. Sometimes it is like in the villages, the laborer, they have no dignity. So these kind of images he made. So he is the first artist who inspired me to work on. And the another artist, I mean, right after Savi Savarkar was J Nandkumar. Have you heard of J Nandkumar? No. So he made this image of Gandhi, and that time it became very popular, Jainant Kumar. So this image of Gandhi, So yeah, so Jainant Kumar become very popular in the year 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now you have a lot of other artists now, because now because of kind of you see there are a lot of discussion discourses. There are a lot of programs, Dalit studies program, women studies program. So there are a lot of discourses around Dalit. So the artists also, there are many artists who are making intervention into this field.
The
Yeah,
idea of Dalit aesthetics. So it's different from mainstream representations of marginalized. And the question is, what allows an image to inhabit a particular Dalit aesthetic? What makes an image belong to or take up Dalit aesthetic?
the term comes from Sharan Kumar Limbale, and there is a book, Dalit Aesthetics. So the Dalit Aesthetics is directly derived from the ideas and the voices from the literary works of the Dalit writers or the lower caste writers. And Dalit aesthetic is basically it's a voice. When people like Om Prakash Valmiki wrote about Juthan, the kind of Juthan. Juthan is leftover food. So so what is the aesthetic of leftover food could be, you know, the kind of food, and the kind of operation, Dalit operation, which happened over the century, over the long period of time. So a lot of people have written based on their own experiences of this kind of subjugation, this kind of marginalization, operation, repression, all these terms, all these negative terms you can ascribe to. So this comes from that kind of voices, this something which is, you use this term negative. So that is like rejection, kind of pushing you to even beyond the margins. So that kind of power, that kind of no but that kind of subjugation, that kind of violence or operation or pathos, pathos is the right word. So it comes from that, that aesthetic comes from that location of marginalization. So basically it's a very literary, it's a very comes from literature. Then it entered into Dalit visual culture, and even now people are talking in terms of Dalit cinema. Like people like some friends, like from JNU, like Harish Wankhede, or let's say Leonard Dickens, from IIT Delhi. So yeah, these people are working on the subject of Dalit cinema and the aesthetics and so on and so forth, like the idea of the hero, Dalit heroism. So other day I was in one of the seminars, and the seminar was about Dalit heroism. So what aesthetics, that can be attributed to Dalit heroism? It is the kind of aesthetic, the conventional aesthetic, what we talk about in our visual culture discourse or visual studies discourse, or is it different? you know what I realized after that discourse, in that discussion after the seminar, that cinema has a power, more power than the visual art, because they could talk about the heroism, Dalit heroism. At least there is like Anil Kapoor. I think he acted Angry Young Man or something in recent movie or something. I haven't seen. I just read some piece by Harish Wankhede. So cinema is producing more heroism for Dalits than the visual art, because as I told you, you also mentioned in your question that there is underrepresented. The Dalit visual culture is underrepresented. It is elitist. So Dalit artists could not become kind of heroic figure, or they could not represent this kind of art in terms of heroism or heroic model. They could they could kind of represent through their art. But cinema has done that. So cinema has that kind of scope, kind of space, that they could do more justice to the Dalit aesthetic, the idea of Dalit aesthetics, because they can show in their moving image, the idea of aesthetics, I would say. Yeah.
So, sir, now I want to see your opinion on how the how the newly developing digital spaces and how the new digital technologies play a role in strengthening the visual culture, like how that has transformed the visual sphere, the role of digital media and technology.
Yeah. So yeah, it is. Yeah, people are doing I when you ask this question, only one kind of person hits my mind. That person is called Bakery Prashad. Have you heard of Bakery Prashad? Siddesh Gautam. So yeah, yes. So I mean, see what kind of things he is doing. He's generating image. He is making his presence felt. The not only his presence, the presence of the movement. Not only I would call it Dalit movement, but he's also representing lot of feminist figures. Like Savitri Bai Phule, or some other figures, or even figures from the Western feminist movement. He's representing Birsa Munda, the other tribal leaders.
Thank you so much, Rahul sir, for taking the time to talk to us about the visual culture. And something I really appreciate is how you have spoken about the last 10 years history, or beyond that, and you have mentioned the earliest Dalit artist, and how, because that sort of knowledge is not readily available on the net.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rahul Dev, for this illuminating conversation and mapping out the history of Dalit visual culture. And dear viewers, join us next Tuesday for more such conversations on culture that matter. And thank you for watching.